won't be like this at all, I promise. Regular question and answers where the rules are, I've just done a presentation of research, performance of research, and you've been here to see it, and you ask questions or answer them, and I answer and respond. Yeah? And that's the only thing that's happening there. I need to leave. And as I said, my questions are around those issues I mentioned before, but also I'm curious if you want to respond to this. When were there moments, if there were moments, and when, were there moments when you had pleasure with this, and what were they? What were the pleasure points, let's say, if any? Anyway, but please ask or respond away.
Perhaps you could explain what is the relationship between this and your research?
What's the relationship?
I can see what you're doing in terms of kind of laying bare the strategy of the workshop.
Yeah.
What did they just help us out a bit with what the research is?
Okay. So the research comes from that observation of here's a thing that I'm passionate about in clowning, in training, which I'm not seeing in performance, my own and others. And why is that? And can it be dragged from the workshop into the performance? Would that be a good thing to do? Why do I want to do that? And if it can, how can it be done? And if it cannot, why can it not be done? And I suppose the issues behind, that binary. And this was instead of, I did have a plan to originally of running a workshop on this exercise with one group of people, and then doing performance using the exercise myself with another group of people, with maybe a couple of observers, and then have a Q&A with two different groups of people who had witnessed different things apart from the observers. But as it was pointed out to me very cleverly, that would just reinforce this binary which I'm struggling with. Then I just get the thing I'm saying, well, why is this like that? So instead of that, I've tried to squash the two together, where two sets of rules get squashed together, and there's something else, perhaps might be something else happening, which is not so contained within those two binaries. Something like that.
Why specifically relevant to clown as opposed to then workshop, rehearsal, performance binary? Is there any specific?
I think there's something quite specific to clowning is that kind of brutalist regime which I mentioned with the laughter and no laughter, in the sense that I mean, perhaps it's just speaking as a clown practitioner that I have that particularly so special perspective on what I do, that I see it's particularly brutal, to be like, yeah, this is my favourite word to talk about what I do. Kind of shocking how much it is that. Whereas, yeah, in Hamlet, there could be, in a non-clown Hamlet, there's all kinds of things you might be looking for in that context with performance and audience, and indeed in the workshop. And really, because that's my practice. Those are the two reasons.
Can you re-articulate, and you probably said it already, I need to hear it again just by itself, that thing you say is trying to capture. What is that?
That's the question. What is the thing? Also, it's another question. So what is that thing? It's the thing which seems to happen and seems to be pleasurable for the workshop performer, let's say, and the workshop spectators. Stay with the workshop.
At the same time, is that important?
Probably.
Because somebody laughing can get pleasure, and somebody being laughed at does not have pleasure.
Right. Well, then I'd say
important.
I think the same time probably is important, because if they didn't have pleasure when the spectator laughed, they would be doing the clowning wrong.
Right.
So yes.
And so, how is that missing from clowning right now? That's not happening right
thing,
there's something.
right, so
what's
to
the
say a little bit more about the
that's
thing. Yeah, so the
Yeah.
thing which happens isn't just the laughter.
No.
It's the, oh, we have seen something, so, fill in the dots. Which seems to show us something which we desperately want to see more of, and which we will call the clowning has appeared. You know, the clown has appeared, and that we could talk around it by saying, it's when that person failed in their objective and admitted it in front of an audience and therefore got to laugh. It doesn't really tell us what the feeling about that thing is, that pleasure, which seems to happen in those kinds of moments. And that thing which seems to happen in those kind of moments, I don't get as an audience in performance.
Could you laugh?
Yeah, no, Tony, then.
I mean, just to press that point a bit further, the thing which seems to be your argument predicated on is that there is a simple brutal response, which is the sign of success or performative failure. Is there laughter or not laughter?
Yes.
Is that the thing which is missing? Or can you go to? Are you saying you go to a clown performance, you can laugh, and yet still the thing is missing?
Yes, exactly. Still the thing is missing. Yes. The pleasure, yeah, I mean, there are many kinds of laughter, and given that the performance event it is set up in that way, you know, you will laugh, or if you don't, well, you know, have a bad time. It doesn't necessarily stem from this thing which I'm saying I want it to come from that. If that's the regime, I would like it to be that. So we could do. Yeah.
Within the workshop that you set up today that we watched, that we worked on, we were aware, and therefore your workshop participants would be aware of what the process was, what the beginning, what the middle, what the end was, and then they would be complicit in how that progressed. So they would be actually building, the audience would be building the narrative, and the clown would be driven by what their response was. So that could possibly be missing in a live performance because you don't know that there is, you don't know what the end result will be. So you don't know what you're leading towards. You don't know what you're either assisting or making faltering, providing faltering steps.
Yeah.
So could that be?
Yeah, I think yes and no, in the sense that, yes, of course, I set up the exercise in the workshop and say you will cross the stage and once you get to there, that's it, the show's finished, as it were. So yes, it's explicit. And that, in a performance, that would be a bit like saying, ladies and gentlemen, tonight you're going to see the great Houdini escape from this, tied up in a bag and get out, so don't know why that one came to my mind. Or you could say, ladies and gentlemen, you will now see a performance of Hamlet in which everyone dies at the end. So there is a sense that everything's set up. However, if it wasn't, someone was just asking me this actually before we saw this today, and I said, I don't know if this works. If I come in, like this with one shoe, it's fairly simple for me to tell you what I want. I want my other shoe. It could be anything. So I think it's quite easy to do that. But yeah, if I was to do it with and it's not the crossing the stage that I want to stage as a performance. It's the when you laugh, I'll do the next thing. That's what I'm after. I'm after it, as this very what Tony you asked there, but I'm after it not simply from the mechanism of the laughter response, but from within tandem with this thing which I failed to explain what it is. Yeah.
I mean, for me, from how I experienced what you just done, and also from my own practice, it wasn't just doing the thing and the laughter. The very important element was when I could really, when the chair, for example, faced us. I think that was really important. That the chair looking this direction or that direction was very different to the chair facing us. And, you know, I think that is a very important element of clowning, is you sharing your own vulnerability in this situation.
So you're
Yes,
saying when the
rather.
chair looked at you,
Yeah.
it was sharing its vulnerability with you?
When the chair looked at me, it was just very different.
But was
Yeah.
it sharing
So-
vulnerability? Do you
So, can I just finish what I
Sorry,
was going
yes,
to say?
sorry.
Yeah. So I'm interested in the choices you make. You presented something which to me was really interesting, and I think the question is really interesting. But in front of that, in your introduction, the way you explained it by emphasizing we are not the workshop and you are not the leader and you're doing this, it seemed to me you put layers and layers of us not being possible to meet in a real situation between you and us. And that I found very confusing, and I just wonder why you made those choices.
Right, because I wanted to confuse the two sets of rules, which I'm having a problem with, why they're separate. One set of rules. I suspect that the workshop, because of its set of rules and conditions, produces a certain kind of laughter and a certain kind of perception of the thing, the clown, and the performance rules and conventions produce a different kind of clown. And if that's so, then partly they're not going to meet. And then there'd be other questions like, well, why are we doing those workshops? You know,
But
what do they
why
produce?
were you doing, you weren't doing either to me. You
I was
weren't
trying to,
performing
no
or
exactly,
doing
so I
work.
was trying to confuse those two sets of rules and squash them up together so that it confused me as well, you know, and, so that to open up possibility of, let's say, clowning happening without it simply being bound by these two sets of conventions, if that makes any sense. So, yeah, and also to do other things, like, as I said, sorry I interrupted you before, but it's clear for me that the chair has no eyes, so it cannot look at the audience. And it's clear it has no vulnerability, therefore it cannot make you laugh by its vulnerability. And yet, for me, I think, reflecting on it, see, the chair made you laugh in exactly the same way as a clown student would make you laugh in a workshop. However,
Aren't we laughing at you?
sorry?
We're laughing at you.
Well,
You're substituting yourself for the chair, but in fact, you know, what you were doing was actually guiding how we were to respond to the chair.
yes, but I'd say that's what happens in the workshop, in a slightly less declared way, the teacher guides how you will laugh at the student. And I'm suspecting that, so I'm looking at that, the setup of the workshop, or before you even got there, but then explicit teaching of the teacher will oblige you to inspect the student in this way, laugh or no laugh. It's the only options you'll have. And that concentrated pressure on that situation, on that moment, may produce the clown. And if it's that pressure and rules which produce the clown, then it has nothing to do with clown personas or vulnerability or anything else like that, which we you know. So if it's to do with just the rules produce the clown, then that's what it is. And then we've got other rules in performance which are sort of related but are different. So that's why I wanted to mess around with, really. Because otherwise we're just in the... if we're just in a workshop, we're asking workshop questions like, you got lots of laughs there, we observed you do that, we enjoyed you doing that, when you did that, it didn't really work, this kind of thing, yeah? So you're looking at training, but one is missing the larger picture, which is it simply this set of rules for the workshop which is producing all this stuff? And if it is, then there's something else.
Does this thing live within rules, or does it transcend rules? Is there such thing as being able to have no rules? I mean, this thing, this moment, this pleasure that we get sometimes.
Yeah. sure about it. Yeah, I think in a sense it has to, because there is always a set of, it must do.
Yeah.
Um,
So
and
why are the rules so important then in this?
well, the rules of a clown workshop are incredibly oppressive in a sense,
Yeah,
because
it's
it's a
really
very,
tight, isn't it?
very condensed thing where you're, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I mean, I love that, you know, it's, we will now pay 100% attention to this, every little detail this person is doing now in front of us, who will be asked to look at us and let us look at them. And yeah, all the stuff I said before about how the exercise is set up, how the concept of clown is set up, it all pushes you towards finding that thing, which then you might go away with and say, that was an amazing thing, you know. And it does feel like that. I'm the first one to feel it. Yeah.
I think I have a very vague idea of what you're doing. It's a blur to me, and it's confusing, and the bunch of different factors make things a bit more difficult to comprehend. So I was wondering if a 6-year-old were to ask you what you were doing, um, if a 6-year-old were to ask you what your covert hypothesis is, what would your reply be?
I think it might be the first thing that comes to mind, without reflecting on it, would be one of the other questions that I've hinted at, which is what's the use of training clowns? It's not quite worded right, but it'll be something around that. Like what's the point of it if you can't do it when it matters? What's the point of practicing something if you're never going to be able to do it?
I see, that's your question. But
Could be.
what's
Not
your
necessarily.
stand? What's your hypothesis?
My hypothesis is that it may be a way of doing the thing that I've practiced in a performance. But if there is a way, it isn't through it isn't by it isn't by magic. It isn't by recreating. Yeah. This is a really good question. I don't know how to answer it properly yet. That's as far as I can get. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Come back to it.
I really enjoyed your presence on stage, because I wanted you to be able to do what you wanted to do, and yet there were so many aspects, so many moments where it was like I lost myself in that kind of thing, which got very kind of like, you know, stumbly, clowny, strange, because you're still wanting, you know, I'm wanting you to, you know, I've come here for a reason,
Yeah.
and I'm wanting you to fulfill that reason.
Yeah.
And then other things are cropping up, different thoughts, moments when you have a realization, an idea, that's where I'm going, I've lost track, all of those faltering steps were as faltering as the chair going across,
Yeah.
or whatever. All of those choices when you encouraged your student, the chair, to turn and look at the make-believe audience, all of those things were moments for me, were moments of clowning. So this was a performance.
Yeah. That was
And
my
it
concept,
works,
yeah.
for me, it works as a performance. And it also works as a question of the performance. So I actually enjoy it. Just like I said.
That's if I've had pleasure in what I've done, it's very similar to what you've just said for me. So that is, yeah. So
Not like that word pleasure, because it's the thing which is missing, or which is
yes.
indiscernible, but it's not the same as laughter, so you could imagine we all laugh, and we have some joy,
Yes.
or individuals might enjoy it, but it's still not necessarily the thing pleasurable.
No, Perhaps because of this, the clown rules, let's call it that, your pleasure will be converted into laughter, will be recognised when you laugh, perhaps. So there must be a link somewhere there.
It's intersubjective, and you kind of imply it's a collective thing. We might all laugh, but the pleasure is...
The laughter moment kind of binds us into the same moment as, you know, but doesn't necessarily mean that we're having the pleasure at the same time or having it the same way, I guess. I couldn't conjecture on that.
You're talking about modes of experience.
Well, depends what do you mean by that?
I don't know, that's a crazy
Oh, right.
word,
Okay.
experience, that's a stupid word.
I mean, I'm talking about when well, why the hell would you sit through a thing and go, yeah. Or why would you do this performing thing? You know, I'm latching on to pleasure as the...
But you framed the whole thing by saying, almost like an ethical statement. You said, I go to clown shows and that thing is just not there.
It's not there.
Yeah.
That's an ethical statement. It's not about individual shows I have attended and enjoyed particularly. It's about the condition of history that we're in at the moment. It's interesting you mentioned conditions of late capitalism all the way through.
Oh,
Yeah,
It,
I quite
it's
like
almost
that.
as if you're
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
saying, you know, what's the problem with the clown today?
Yeah, what's the problem with the clown?
Yeah, absolutely, can be. You know, historically, the workshop, as conceived in this way, you know, it's very. You know, I've droned on. You know, I've spoken written about this a lot, but this is a historical moment. We have this approach to workshops. You know, Lecoq's, according to him, 20 years later, when he wrote about it, early experiments with clowning in 1960 were, okay, everybody, what do we know about clowns? They make people laugh. Okay, so let's sit in a circle. You, get up, make us laugh. No laughter. Okay, sit down, laughter. So happened time and time again. This is the fundamental exercise which claims to reproduce the rules of clown performance. And virtually the whole of contemporary clown training is predicated on that, this exercise particularly. So it's a very specifically historical. I suspect also, I'm interested in the fact, not only in the clown workshop are we the participants perceive that we have the experience of this thing, oh yes, the clown, as if it's been sort of torn from the moment and it's something special, which it feels like, and it still feels like to me with a chair or a plant, but I know it's not that because it's just a chair and a plant. But it still feels like that unique moment, and yet in performance it feels like, wow, these unique moments are not happening. And I think there's a way in which the whole contemporary clown training is kind of narrates itself in that same way. That here in 1960, clowns are no longer funny, the circus is decadent. The old tricks don't count, old routines, they're not authentic clowns. Let's start from the basic thing. What do we know about clowns? Clowns make people laugh, right? Clowns make people laugh. When they fail, flop. That's our teaching method. So there's a sense in which the whole method of teaching seems to kind of be ripped out of the moment, and the whole of the past has disappeared. And it's like, this is an amazing new teaching method which has just come out of the moment. So it's almost like the whole teaching method is like a clown moment. And that's landed us in a whole heap of trouble. But that's where we are.
It perhaps could be, I mean, I'm interested just from your conversation in trying to find out, because you mentioned ownership of the lab. Yeah, you mentioned, and you said that that's something you might see later on. Not later on in this, but later on in life.
Yeah.
But it feels like the laugh is a reaction, and it's not necessarily a reaction to the clown. It's a reaction that lives in the aesthetic between the clown and the individual or the group. So, you know, the opposite of aesthetic is anesthetic. You know, to not feel something. So all you have to do is feel. All you have to do is produce something
a relief from the stress of imagining being myself there, trying to make people laugh out of nothing. Kind of difficult to explain myself properly, but yeah, rather than something that's funny, it's a relief from pain. But like you keep saying anesthetic, you keep mentioning brutal, all these kind of words all about pressure. Yeah, rather than something that's fun, something that makes you laugh, something that's hilarious. It's about, seems to be about pain, concentrated pain, and we're sharing your pain,
But
waiting for that response, which is relief from that pain.
But then my question then would be, if that's the case, then two questions. How is that? What is that mechanism of releasing the pain and provoking the laughter? Does it just happen, like when it wants to happen, or what is that? And then secondly, in the case of the chair or a plant or chicken or whatever choose, where is the pain? Because the chair feels no pain. And although you can perhaps you imagine, if I was that chair / person, I would be suffering, or I don't know really. But so how pain, suffering, and laughter have an interesting relationship. But what is it? You know, so how does it happen?
It wasn't just, I mean, this was object theatre you did. You did puppets, didn't you? I mean, this was not the chair and the plant and the whatever the thing was by itself. You animated them. You know, that's why they have the front and the back, and that's why they become characters, because it's like any object theatre. You use them to demonstrate something, so you came through it. So we weren't relating to them. We were relating through you, to you through them.
Yeah, I'm not sure this came yesterday as well, and I started thinking, am I doing puppetry? And afterwards I think I'm not. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, whether this is object theatre or not. But for example, when I think there was a moment when I was outside with the chair and I just moved the chair and somebody laughed so the chair could come in. For me, that's the same thing I would do perhaps if it was me. I would hope to be as good as the chair at acting, in the sense that, I wouldn't have any kind of psychological mess-ups, So yes, but depends what you're implying by puppetry and object theatre. For me, as I say, objects are the ideal actors, and I would like clowns I would like them to be more object-like in that sense. But if it implies the opposite of, the object, in order to make us laugh, in this case, must be infused with personality or feelings or intentions or pathos or whatever, then I'm not so sure that's what I did or not.
No, just movement, even just movement.
Yeah.
Not emotion, but it was you were moving them.
I moved it. Yeah, I moved it.
It
Yeah.
wasn't posed with an intention, because you
Yeah.
said there was a reason, there were actions that the chair needed to do.
Yes.
So it needed
So
our attention.
you had already given it.
Yeah.
And actually, whether you perceive you were doing puppetry
Yeah.
or not, if we perceived that it was
Yeah.
puppetry, then it was puppetry.
Yeah.
Like, the same way if you perceive it's clowning,
Yeah.
we don't get clowning there, clowning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's the same kind of thing. I appreciate that you wanted to use inanimate objects,
Yeah.
but the fact that you implied that there was an intention that they had to do,
Yeah.
then their
Yeah.
failure to conclude
Correct.
that,
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
it was
Yeah.
puppetry.
Yeah. We should finish because it's time. If there's anything very quickly.
Well, I think it was terribly clever and beautifully done, but I think you're a liar, because we were the participants
Yes,
in your
absolutely.
workshop.
Absolutely. Yes. No, it was an absolute lie.
And I think the objects were superb performers.
I think so.
And
too.
I must give you my article on Dennis Silk,
Yeah.
because he said that for actors they should spend a week in a furniture store so that they could appreciate the thingness of the things. Because an object's got no pretense. And that's what he wanted to achieve as a performer.
Wow, that's right up the street. Thank you very much. Thanks for your question. That's very useful.
I just think it's difficult to get out of clowning, dissociated from its because it was professionally established with a function in mind. So is there because of its function, but initially at least, and now maybe because of the changing system, there is a possibility for the identity of a clown to change, but it's starting to get back.
Yeah. I mean, the whole question of how to see it as function or as persona or as the confusion of the temporal gland is to do with that, dissatisfaction of the gland as function. It's looking for essence. But that's all.
I just wonder how many people here have actually done the whole workshop thing. I've just done one myself at a festival, so it's quite random. I was trying to get the feeling that maybe the people that were perhaps the most confused or didn't respond with as much love, hadn't been to as much workshop, so hadn't had it instilled in them to respond in such a way. I get the kind of feeling that maybe you've done some workshops.
Maybe.
Yeah. So whereas I've done that one, even I have an interest in clowning and just the dancing form myself, kind of seeing myself, but I want to take it further. So I've been completely inspired by being here. It has really made me question, should I now go and do a clown workshop? Because
Oh, please do.
I feel like would I be trained, or am I going to be training myself? But
Yeah,
hopefully,
go do it with your eyes
But
open.
in terms of one of the other questions, and that's
Yeah,
a scientific biological response, but about where does laughter come from? Apparently, I mean, genetically, biologically, neurologically, it's just surprise. Hence, babies laugh. It's easy to make a baby laugh because everything's new to them up until a point where they've experienced those things on multiple occasions. So it is just about surprise.
Something unexpected.
But also, I think clowning laughter is surprise. I think clowning is surprise mixed with the relief from pain, because I've got some pain.
Those
Pleasure.
I mean, I'm interested. There's some sort of newish theories about baby humour, like under 12-month-old children, because it was psychologists used to say, oh no, children under 12 months don't have humour skills because they can't recognise incongruence, they can't recognise when something is wrong, and they can't recognise stimuli. They don't get this fun that something's funny. Of course, babies do laugh. And there's another. It's a different kind
On
of
that note,
relationship.
because I was once with someone who had a baby, and I remember the first time I went to feed the baby with a bottle myself in bed. Like at that point, my partner had been doing it, and I would go and put the bottle in the baby's mouth, and then he would laugh, so I can put the bottle in his mouth, and I'd take it away, and he'd be passive again, and I'd go and put it in, and it did it multiple occasions.
Yeah.
It was like the baby was taking the piss out of me, basically, like a 6-month-old baby.
Yeah.
It was quite incredible.
Yeah.
Like, I really did think he was laughing at me.
Well, certainly laughing at the situation.
Yeah.
We can all, again, we can take all of these things personally, but again, I think that ownership thing is a really interesting question. Like, who owns the laughter? Actually, the laughter lives in that space between the two things. Yeah, like aesthetics. There's no such thing as a painting doesn't have an aesthetic. A painting is a painting, and it's only when it's viewed and it's the experience between the viewer and the thing, that's where aesthetic lives.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
anesthetic, as in no response whatsoever.
That's why when I saw
That's
your
really interesting.
thing on Facebook,
see Marcel, Marcel is on.
It's at 6:30.